Can I ask to the stage Anthony Albanese, Shadow Minister for Infrastructure, Transport, Cities and Tourism. You saw Albo appear a number of times in the video footage. We've had a long relationship with him. He's been a great supporter of the bus industry, public transport and the cities as a key portfolio for the federal government as Minister and now as Shadow Minister. He already told me that, as I went down the back to let him know that I was bringing him up to stage now, that he has right of reply and that everything I said in my speech was rubbish. So he was joking, of course. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Anthony Albanese.
Well, thanks very much, Michael. Can I begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the country and pay my respect to their elders past and present. Can I acknowledge Minister Fletcher, Minister McCormick, who are here, Shadow Minister Kim Carr. Are there any other colleagues here? Very important not to leave people out. You know, you can get into trouble. It's a dangerous game up on the hill from time to time. Particularly at the moment, it's an interesting time. Can I very much thank Vic for an invite to address you this evening. And can I say that as I walked in, I was up there on the screen. I was younger, looked a bit better, but I think what struck me as I saw that was that we are, to some extent, all friends in this room who have a common agenda, who agree on the direction that's needed going forward. One of the areas in which we agree is that we need to support jobs and Australian manufacturing. And I'm sitting next to a gent who, without advertising the company, because there's many of you in this room, who's exporting buses to Japan. What that shows is that if we get smart manufacturing, quality manufacturing right, we can, in this country, continue to be a country which makes things and which earns dollars and employs Australians, producing quality product. And in the bus industry, you certainly do that. The second part of, I guess, your agenda, which you have led, frankly, throughout the nation, is the city's agenda. And I pay tribute to you. You've been ahead of the game. I thank the generous comments speaking about the 30-minute city just next door at the National Press Club, where I announced that as a Labor government objective. Of course, that was followed by subsequently Prime Minister Turnbull announcing his support for such a policy. But the truth is that the bus industry was ahead of the game on those issues. We need to deal with our cities. Our cities drive 80% of our national economy. They are where 8 out of every Australians live. Increasingly, that is the case. The idea that you can have a national government that represents the national interest that isn't concerned with our cities is, of course, a nonsense. And it is a good thing, in my view, that we have a Prime Minister and an opposition party that believe in an engagement from the national government with urban policy. What we need to do, though, is to translate that rhetoric into actual investment and action. We produced the State of the Australian Cities reports every year. They were downloaded more than 1 million times each. What that was an example of was evidence-based policy making. So you get the evidence, you get the detail, then the policy flows. It identified drive-in, drive-out suburbs, where people live increasingly in suburbs where they can afford to buy a home, but where there aren't jobs. So they have to travel vast distances into the CBDs, where because of the changing nature of the Australian economy, increasingly the jobs that are created have been around our CBDs. For example, in Sydney, there are 350,000 people travel from Western Sydney into the CBD or its nearby surrounds such as North Sydney CBD. We need to change that. We need to change that by having a view of cities in terms of employment creation that creates jobs closer to where people live, but we also need to change it by essentially challenging the nonsense that you can deal with urban congestion in the 21st century by the private motor car. You can't. You can't. And we need to be prepared to be honest about that. Unless we have mass transit, we can't have the sort of growth that we see happening right now in Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane and other capital cities. Indeed, unless we have a high-speed rail network down the east coast of Australia, we can't also deal with growth in terms of our regional cities, including this one where this meeting takes place, which is Australia's largest inland city. We do need to address this as a matter of urgency. Infrastructure Australia has shown that unless urban congestion is dealt with, it'll cost the national economy $53 billion by the year 2031. And yet, we still have a failure to address the Melbourne Metro, the Cross River Rail, all these in Brisbane, all these projects that we know are necessary, that we know need to be got done. And this comes at a time whereby every economic expert, including, and it's popular these days for some to talk about, the independence of independent advisors. Well, there was one last Friday, the Reserve Bank Governor, a bloke called Philip Lowe, and he made it very clear that there was no better time for increased investment in infrastructure, where you have a confluence of events, where you have one in terms of the resources sector moving from the investment to the production phase and therefore a decline in infrastructure investment there. Secondly, of course, you have record low interest rates, not quite as low as it was a year ago. And that'll give you an idea of lost opportunity. A year ago, you could borrow on long-term interest rates for infrastructure investment at 1.8% if you were the Commonwealth. Today, it's 2.8%. Let's not wait till it's 3.8 or 4.8 or 5.8. Let's get on with what is absolutely necessary, where we know it is necessary and whereby we would have bipartisan support for such an initiative in terms of infrastructure investment in our cities, not just our capital cities, but our major regional cities as well. So I thank the industry for its leadership. These issues are important, of course, as well. Michael spoke about sustainability. One of the things that we can do to increase sustainability is to get people out of the private motor car and get them onto buses, trains and trams. That could be a major initiative. There's significant benefits in terms of livability as well as, of course, significant benefits in terms of road safety that come with public transport options, where if you look through the entire cost-benefit analysis needs to include figures such as health costs that come from not just pollution, but also literally the impact that people travelling on our roads have in private motor vehicles compared with public transport forms of transport. So can I thank you? Can I pledge on behalf of Bill Shorten and the Labor opposition our continued engagement with you, our commitment to engage with you constructively, to provide not just opposition to where we think the government is wrong, but constructive engagement where we think the government is right, and a preparedness to work with them. That's something that I've been prepared to do, and I have a good, I think, constructive relationship with Darren Chester, the Minister for Infrastructure, with Paul Fletcher, who I interrupted his weekend with a phone call, on Saturday, and that, I think, is as it should be, because at the end of the day we have a substantial national challenge. It's a substantial national economic challenge. I think there's been an element of complacency in how we deal with it. We simply can't afford it anymore. And where solutions have been identified, let's work together, employers, employees through their trade unions, political organisations, including through the National Parliament of Australia, to make sure that there's that national leadership when it comes to the issues which your industry is concerned with. Thanks very much.